Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. I did a drug trial 3 months ago. I need to tell someone what happened. I keep thinking I should go to the news or find a lawyer or something, but the NDA I signed, pretty sure it's airtight. And anyway, who's going to believe me? The researchers don't. Every time I call, I get the same line. All test subjects recovered normally within 72 hours of the neutralizing agent. But I know what I know. 6 years of pain, ever since I blew out both knees playing college ball. The doctors gave it the name severe bilateral patellofemoral pain syndrome with cartilage degeneration. What it meant was this: every step felt like grinding glass. Every stair was a negotiation. Some nights, I'd end up on the kitchen floor, heating pads on both knees, just rocking, crying, not even trying to stop. I tried everything: PT, cortisone, anti-inflammatories, opioids that made me sick and constipated, and almost got me hooked. The bills already bankrupted me once. I was working a desk job that barely covered rent. Forget the doctor visits. Saw the ad for a clinical trial. $2,500 for a month-long study of some revolutionary long-acting analgesic. I called that same day. Neurovantage was in one of those glass buildings downtown, the kind with valet parking and fake plants that probably cost more than my rent. The waiting room had leather chairs, abstract art, and magazines that weren't ancient. Dr. Sarah Chen looked mid-40s, maybe. Graying hair, sharp eyes. She talked like someone who didn't need you to trust her, because you already did. It's called X47, she said, pushing a stack of papers across the desk. Synthetic compound, blocks pain signals at the cellular level. 1 injection, 4 weeks of relief. I stopped reading. 4 weeks, no pain. I didn't care what the rest said. After injection into the gluteus maximus, the compound is slowly metabolized by the liver. Most subjects report complete pain relief within 6 hours and no adverse effects. Most subjects. I should have asked about the others. The shock was nothing. The nurse took me to a room, had me lie face down, and gave me the injection. Felt like any other needle. Quick, forgettable. Dr. Chen told me to keep a daily journal documenting any effects, positive or negative, and to call immediately if I experienced anything concerning. I drove home expecting nothing to happen for hours, but somewhere on the freeway, I realized I'd been unconsciously shifting my weight in the driver's seat, trying to find a comfortable position for my knees. Then I noticed I wasn't doing it anymore. By the time I parked in my driveway, the constant low-level ache that had been my companion for 6 years was gone. That night, 8 hours straight, first time since college. The next morning, I started the journal. Day 1, October 15. Woke up at 7:30. No alarm, slept straight through. 8 hours. I haven't done that in years, usually. I'm up 3-4 times a night. Every time I roll over, the knees flare up. Getting out of bed felt weird. I kept bracing for it, that grinding glass feeling. But it didn't come. I walked to the kitchen. Just walked. No limping, no favoring one side, no grabbing the wall. Made coffee. Stood there drinking it. Just stood there. I didn't realize how much I'd been shifting, leaning, adjusting, until I wasn't. Tried walking around the block. Made it halfway. My knees didn't hurt, but my legs felt weak, like I'd been in bed for months. I guess I've been guarding my knees so long that the rest of me forgot how to move. Weird thing at lunch, though. I bit my tongue. Not that hard. Just one of those accidental bites. But it barely registered. No wince, no sharp jolt. Just distant. Maybe I'm so focused on the pain being gone that everything else feels muted. Dr. Chen called tonight. Asked how I was doing. I told her everything was perfect. She sounded pleased. Said to keep documenting everything. Even positive changes can be significant data points. I didn't ask what kind of changes she meant. Day 2, October 16. Something happened last night. I'm still shaking. Got up around 3 to pee. Half asleep. Still not used to sleeping through the night. Stumbled in the dark. Hit my pinky toe on the dresser. Jesus. It felt like someone crushed my whole foot with a hammer. I dropped. Couldn't scream. Just these awful choking sounds while I grabbed at it. Crawled to the light switch. Thought I'd see blood. Bone. Something torn open. But there was barely anything. Just a red dot. I sat on the bathroom floor staring at it. 20 minutes, maybe more. The pain faded, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It felt like the worst injury I've ever had. From stubbing my toe. My knees are still perfect, no pain at all. But that toe thing won't leave me alone. It keeps looping in my head. Something's happening. I know it. Day 3, October 17, called in sick today. Couldn't focus after last night. Thought maybe some fresh air would help. It was nice out. Mid-70s, light breeze. I sat on the back patio for 10 minutes. Then my skin started burning. At first I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was still shaken up. But it kept getting worse. It felt like I was under a heat lamp. It quickly moved from warm to scorching. Then it got worse. My arms, face, neck, and every exposed part felt like it was pressed against the stove. I ran inside. The second I crossed the door, it stopped. I stood in the kitchen, breathing hard, trying to make sense of it. Then I realized the sun. Normal sunlight felt like torture. I called Neurovantage around 3, got bounced around until someone picked up, said she was Dr. Chen's assistant. I told her what happened. Long pause. Have you experienced any other unusual sensations? Her voice was flat, careful, like she was reading something. I told her about the toe. Another pause. Mr. Patterson, these sound like normal adjustment responses. Please continue documenting everything and call us if symptoms worsen significantly. Normal adjustment? I can't go outside. The compound affects neural pathways in complex ways. Temporary hypersensitivity isn't unusual. She sounded like she'd said it before. I asked if other people had gone through this. She said she couldn't discuss other cases. Before hanging up, she reminded me about their emergency line. If absolutely necessary, my knees still feel perfect. No pain at all. Whatever this drug is doing, it's doing exactly what they said it would. But everything else feels off. Day 4, October 18. I'm writing this at 2:47 a.m. because I can't sleep. And I need to get this down while it's still fresh. The temperature dropped tonight. Must have hit the low 50s because the heater kicked on around midnight. I was lying in bed when I heard the click of the thermostat, then the whoosh of air through the vents. The first breath of warm air hit my face, and I thought I was going to die. It felt like opening an oven and sticking my head inside. The air from the vent, which is usually soft and warm, hit my skin like steam. I rolled off the bed and hit the floor, gasping. My whole body felt like it was being scalded. I crawled to the hallway and shut off the thermostat. Then I lay on the bathroom tiles until the burning stopped. Took 15 minutes before I could think straight again. I checked my skin in the mirror. Nothing. No redness. No marks. Just normal skin. It felt like third-degree burns, but there was nothing. I'm sitting here now wearing 3 layers with the windows cracked open. The house is freezing, but I can't risk turning the heat back on. This isn't normal adjustment. Something's going wrong in my nervous system. The drug was supposed to block pain, but it's like it's amplifying everything else. A breeze feels like sandpaper. My sheets felt like steel wool when I tried to get back in bed. I keep thinking about the assistant's voice, the way she paused when I described it, like she was checking something, comparing symptoms to a list. I'm going to call the emergency line. I can't keep doing this, day 5. October 19, I'm back home. Called Neurovantage at 4 in the morning. Got transferred 3 times before someone could schedule an emergency appointment. Dr. Chen was unavailable. They said Dr. Martinez could see me at 10. I was driving downtown when the hunger hit. Started as normal stomach rumbling. Within minutes, it felt like my insides were being shredded. I pulled into a gas station, doubled over the steering wheel, gasping. Thought maybe something ruptured. I stumbled into the store and grabbed the first thing I saw. Box of powdered donuts, tore it open and started eating right there in the aisle. The clerk stared at me. I didn't care. I ate 4, fast, shoving them in until the pain stopped. He asked if I was okay. I mumbled something about low blood sugar and bought the rest of the box. Dr. Martinez was younger than Chen. Nervous. Kept asking about my pain tolerance baseline. Checked a tablet while I talked. When I told him about the heater incident, he nodded like he'd heard it before. We can administer a neutralizing compound, he said. It should counteract the NX-47 within 24 hours. The needle looked normal, standard vaccine type. When it went in, I screamed. It felt like a red-hot poker. Pain shot up my arm and through my whole body. I started hyperventilating. Vision went black around the edges. Next thing I knew, I was on the floor. Martinez was kneeling beside me, asking if I could hear him. The effects appeared to be intensifying, he said to someone else in the room. We should document the timeline more carefully. I wanted to ask what he meant by that. Couldn't speak, just focused on breathing. It's been 6 hours since the shot. Still hypersensitive. The tags in my shirt feel like razor blades. My neighbor's dog barking makes my skin crawl. Please let this work. I can't live like this. Day 6, October 20. The shot didn't work. Or if it did, it's taking its sweet time about it. Everything is backwards now. Everything. Made hot chocolate this morning. First sip tasted like poison, like licking a battery. Spit it out and dropped the mug. The mug hit my hand and broke on the floor. Should have hurt. It felt incredible. A wave of pure bliss shot up my arm. Better than any painkiller I've ever taken. Had to grab the counter to keep from falling over. The bruise is getting darker, and it feels amazing every time I touch it. I can't eat. Everything tastes like ash. Water tastes like metal, but pain. Oh God, pain feels like heaven. I have scratches on my arms. Don't remember making them. 3 lines on each side. They feel good. I keep catching myself trying to make more. Had to leave the kitchen because I kept staring at the broken pieces of the mug. This is sick. I know it's sick, but I can't stop thinking about it. Food is poison. Pain is pleasure. What did they do to me? Went to Neurovantage. Couldn't wait. It's the weekend. And the building was locked. But I saw movement in the windows upstairs. Banged on the door until security came down. I need Dr. Chen. Now. She came down 20 minutes later. Tired eyes. Overworked. She wasn't surprised. She knew. Mr. Patterson, how are you feeling? Fix this, please. Whatever you did to me, fix it. She told me to follow her upstairs. The elevator was too bright. The humming is too loud. Everything was too much, but I needed answers. Her office looked different. The abstract art on the walls seemed to move when I wasn't looking straight at it. She sat behind her desk and opened a file, thicker than I remembered. The occasional hypersensitivity phase typically lasts only 2 to 6 hours. She said, her eyes focused on the files. Then the neural pathways begin to reorganize. What does that mean? NX-47 doesn't just block pain signals, Mr. Patterson. It alters how your nervous system processes sensory input. The initial effect is complete analgesia for the targeted pain source. But the compound continues working, remapping your entire pain response system. You knew this would happen. The inversion is temporary. In most cases, your system should return to baseline within 2 to 3 days. She closed the file. Some subjects experience profound neurological changes. The compound appears to reverse the polarity of pain and pleasure receptors in approximately 2% of test subjects. This should only last a few days. You should be able to manage. Should. Manage? I can't eat food. I can't go outside. I can't touch anything without wanting to scream or hurt myself. The cravings for self-harm are concerning, but they typically diminish as the neutralizing compound works through the system. You're talking about me like I'm a lab rat. She looked up. Mr. Patterson, you signed a comprehensive consent form acknowledging the experimental nature of NX-47. All potential side effects were disclosed. Potential side effects? You buried this in 40 pages of medical jargon. The compensation was commensurate with the risk level. I wanted to hit something. The urge was so strong, I had to grip the arms of the chair. How many people have you done this to? NX-47 has shown remarkable success in eliminating chronic pain conditions. The preliminary trials have been very promising. How many, Dr. Chen? Patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing specific numbers. But there are others. Yes, there are others. What if I report this? What if I go to the FDA? Mr. Patterson, you voluntarily enrolled in an FDA-approved clinical trial. All procedures were conducted according to federal guidelines. Your signature is on every consent document. But you didn't tell me this would happen. We informed you that NX-47 was an experimental compound with unknown long-term effects. The neurological remapping was listed as a possible outcome in Section 12 of the consent documentation. I tried to remember Section 12, tried to remember reading any of it carefully, but I'd been desperate. All I saw was the promise of 4 weeks, without knee pain. She stood up. Mr. Patterson, I understand you're distressed, but the compound has accomplished exactly what you hoped it would. Your chronic pain is gone. The side effects are manageable with proper support. The neutralizing agent will completely stop the side effects within the next few days. And unfortunately, the pain will return as well. I was escorted out. Dejected. Tired. Day 8. October 22. Something's happening to my perception. Colors look more intense, but also distorted. The red numbers on my alarm clock look like they're bleeding. The green light on the coffee maker pulses like a heartbeat. Sounds are unbearable. My neighbor's life blower sounds like a hurricane. The refrigerator hum makes my teeth ache. The mirror is the worst part. I look the same, but something's off. Like I'm seeing myself from a slight angle, even when I'm standing straight. My eyes look darker, tired, different. I called Neurovantage to ask about visual disturbances. The same assistant answered, put me on hold for 5 minutes, came back and said, perceptual changes are within normal parameters for NX-47 subjects. Normal parameters. Everything is within normal parameters with them. The scratches and bruises are healing. I miss them. I miss how they felt. I keep thinking about making new ones. That's not normal. That can't be normal parameters. Day 9, October 23, this morning. I woke up, and my nerve endings were growing outside my skin. I could see them. Hair-thin silver wires coming out of every inch of me, spreading across the sheets like spider webs. They pulsed with each heartbeat. I could watch signals traveling through them, little flashes of light moving along the strands. The wires were connecting to everything. The lamp, the alarm clock, the heating vent. Every time something made a noise or changed temperature, I felt it through the wires. When the furnace kicked on, pleasure flooded my system. When a car drove past, the vibrations came up through the floor and into the network. Each pulse felt better than anything I've ever known. I touched one. It was like touching my own brain. I felt the electricity of my nervous system, raw and unfiltered. The euphoria was so intense I blacked out. When I came to, I was on the floor, next to the bed. Blood on my hands. The wires were still there, still connected to everything. But some were broken. The broken ends sparked. Each spark sent waves of ecstasy through me. I crawled to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The wires were everywhere. Face, scalp, arms. They moved when I breathed. In the reflection, I saw them spreading behind me. A silver web, linking me to every surface. I knew it couldn't be real. Nerve endings don't grow outside the body. But I could feel every wire. I could trace their paths. When I brushed against the door frame, pleasure shot through the wires and dropped me to my knees. I called 911. The paramedics couldn't see the wires. They walked through them. Every time they touched one, I screamed. One kept saying, "Sir, there's nothing there," while the other prepared a sedative. But I could feel his radio. I could feel the engine of the ambulance. I could feel everything. They sedated me. The needle went in, and I watched the drug move through one of the wires like dark fluid in a clear tube. It felt incredible. Better than the scratches. Better than the broken mug. Better than anything. Now I'm in the psychiatric ward. The doctors can't see the wires, but they're still here. They've spread further. They reach across the room to the medical equipment, the other patients, the electrical systems in the walls. I can feel everything the hospital feels. Every heartbeat from the monitors, every breath from the ventilators, every pulse from every machine. The nurse came in to check my IV. She walked through a cluster of wires, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from moaning. She made a note on my chart about continued visual hallucinations, and left. They don't understand. The wires aren't hallucinations. They're adaptations. My nervous system is evolving. NX-47 is turning me into something that can experience everything as pleasure. They kept me here for 3 days, sedated and restrained. The first night was the worst. The IV needle felt like molten metal, but good molten metal. The dry sheets of the hospital bed felt like sandpaper. and sent waves of pleasure over my skin. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Each beep felt like a tiny shock in my ears. I started timing my breathing to match the beeps, trying to make it stronger. Second night, the wires started fading. I was sad to see them go. They ran every test: blood work, MRI, and neurological exams. Dr. Rodriguez kept asking about drug use if I were some junkie. All the tests came back normal, perfect. My knee cartilage looked better than it had in years. Sometimes the mind can play tricks when we're under stress, he said. Dr. Chen visited on the second day. She brought a man in a suit, said Neurovantage would cover all hospital costs as a courtesy. Didn't mention the $2,500 from the study. I didn't ask. Money feels pointless when you can't tell if you're losing your mind. By the third day, things started changing back. The IV needle just felt like a needle. Food tasted like food again, and the pain came back. Slow at first, then stronger. My knees feel like they're grinding again. I should be relieved. Instead, I feel like I lost something. Like waking up from the best dream I've ever had. They discharged me this afternoon. Bottle of ibuprofen. Pamphlet about stress management. Dr. Rodriguez shook my hand and wished me luck with my adjustment period. Got home and found 3 lawyers sitting in my driveway. Black sedan, tinted windows, waiting by the front door. One was the same suit from the hospital. He had a briefcase full of papers. Mr. Patterson, we need to discuss your recent medical expenses. The hospital bill was $47,000. They said they'd pay it all, but only if I signed their agreement. Liability waiver, non-disclosure, nothing unusual. I started reading the fine print. My hands were shaking from rage. The papers said I'd never talk about what happened. Never seek more medical care related to the trial. Never contact other test subjects. If I broke any of it, I'd owe them the full hospital cost, plus damages. What if I don't sign? The lawyer smiled. Then you're responsible for your own medical expenses and their consequences. $47,000. I don't have $47,000. I signed. My knees are killing me tonight. Back to the old pain like the last few days never happened. I should be grateful, but I keep thinking about the silver wires. The way they pulsed, the way they connected me to everything. What if I wasn't hallucinating? What if they know I wasn't? What if I could reach out and feel them again? I'm calling Neurovantage tomorrow. Story number 2. When I first met my neighbor, Mr. Katz, she scared the shit out of me. I was walking up the cracked sidewalk to her front door to introduce myself because I had just finished moving in and wanted to start getting to know my neighbors. The house was uniquely large compared to all of the other homes on the street, adorned with steep slanted roofs and vertical wooden framing, a cacophony of plants bursting over the backyard fence on either side. It was the house that ended the street. The pavement of the road and sidewalk abruptly cut off into grass. The door was thick wood that looked like it weighed a ton. The brass gargoyle door knocker rapped loudly, echoing into the house as I stood for a moment waiting for a reply. I jumped when a creaky voice from my left said, "Hello there, dearie." I turned to look down at a cheery old woman's face that was wrinkled in a closed-eyed smile. I was startled. It felt like she had scared me on purpose. The backyard gate slammed shut, and I noticed that the old woman was wiping dirt off her hands. She must have been gardening. "Hello to you as well. I just moved in next door," I said, trying to be friendly. "Welcome to the neighborhood. My name is Katrina Katz. Just call me Katz, dearie." She opened her eyes and continued smiling, but I was taken aback again. Her eyes were yellow, very yellow. They looked like sickly saucers of spoiled milk. My apprehension turned to empathy for Miss Katz. Yellow eyes can mean liver problems, something my own grandmother had struggled with for years. I just wanted to say hello. I am going to go get back to unpacking. You should come over for dinner sometime. Nice meeting you, I said. I'm sure I will, dearie, Miss Katz said. Then she turned back towards the backyard gate, glancing one more time at me before getting to her gardening. And I went back to my new home, which was filled with boxes that needed my attention. That night, I slept poorly. The house was dead quiet. The only noise was the air conditioning unit kicking on every once in a while. I am a very light sleeper, so that's why I woke up when a strange noise started permeating through the edges of my sleepy consciousness. There was a sound so quiet that a normal person would have slept through it. I lay covered in my bed, sensitive ears straining to discern what the noise was. It sounded like someone was digging in mud. I sat up, trying to quiet my breathing so I could hear where it was coming from. But my wooden floors made the sound reverberate from all directions in my room. I could not work up the courage to get out of bed and investigate. Something told me I should just lie down and put on some white noise to ignore it. Every night for a week did just that, ignoring the noise and getting some decent sleep. When I asked my other neighbor, Todd, a nice middle-aged truck driver, one day if he had heard the noise, he said he didn't know anything about it. I bet you it's Miss Katz. You can catch her out pretty late sometimes. Between you and me, I think she has a bit of dementia. Just a bit. She loves her gardening. I've even seen her doing it at night, which is weird, but to each their own. She must love it. She imports special fertilizer all the time. Here comes a truck now. He nodded towards her house. A van pulled into the driveway. It had a purple flower logo on the metal siding that was indeed befitting of a fertilizer company. A burly man dressed in all black greeted Miss Katz at her gate and started carrying brown sacks into her backyard. She noticed us watching and gave a cheery wave to us while we waved back. Todd said, "Really sweet woman. I've known her for years. She's been living on Belmont Avenue as long as anyone can remember. Makes great apple pie." I decided to see the garden for myself that afternoon. I made it look like I was cleaning my gutters, which, to be fair, were disappointingly dirty. No thanks to my landlord. I stood up on my roof to peer over the bushes spilling into my backyard, only then realizing what a jungle Miss Katz's backyard was. Bushes, flowers, vines, short and tall trees, bird baths, stone pathways, you name it. If Miss Katz was really doing it all herself, it had to have taken up all of her time. The garden was in pristine condition, and scattered throughout the yard were the large brown fertilizer sacks, some ripped open with black soil spilling out. There was a smell that rose out of the backyard and drifted towards me as I studied the garden. A sickly sweet stench that was quite pungent. I could see lavender, rose, and dracaena flowers, so it was possible they were responsible for the strange odor. Something was wrong, though. A part of my brain was reminded at the time of how my grandfather's large liquid fly traps smelled when they were full to the brim with dead insects. I was also reminded of rancid meat you discovered had been molding in the back of your fridge for weeks. An itch on the back of my neck grew while I was scouting. It took me a minute to notice the yellow eyes peering at me between large purple curtains out of the corner of my vision. I was startled and turned to look back at Miss Katz, unsure of how long she had been staring at me. She waved and smiled, nodding towards her garden like it were quite special before going inside. I couldn't be sure, but before I turned to face her, I could have sworn she was looking at me with a face contorted in utter hatred. It was 9 nights ago when I watched Ms. Katz die. When I woke, I was confused. I could make out the soft noise from nights before that still somehow demanded every ounce of my attention. I looked at my nightstand and realized my phone was not playing my white noise. I must have forgotten to turn it on. I decided it was time to confront Ms. Katz. If she really did have dementia, maybe I could just talk to her, and she would realize she should be asleep and not doing whatever weird shit she was doing in the middle of the night. I crept through the house, slowly opening the back door. The sound of crickets and rustling leaves mixed with the digging noise that was now sharp and clear. I could not stop myself from approaching a peephole in the fence. When I was a few spans from the fence, the sound suddenly stopped. I froze, waiting. A rhythmic thumping noise started coming down over the fence. What was she up to now? I had to know what she was doing. One eye closed, I peered through the hole into the backyard. The backyard looked like it did when I last saw it. Winding stone paths, now illuminated by moonlight. More fertilizer bags were open, and the garden beds were torn up, like plants were being rearranged. I quickly found her. Ms. Katz was on a ladder pulling at one of the fertilizer bags, which was stuck in one of her second-story windows. Pulling does not properly describe the motion. Ms. Katz was throwing her body weight faster than seemed possible away from the window, the bag inching with each heave. She thrashed again and again and again. It looked like it hurt. It looked like her arms should have dislocated. I started panicking. Clearly Miss Katz had more than a little bit of dementia, as Todd had said. I needed to help her, to get her to a hospital and make sure she was mentally sound. But it was too late. Suddenly Miss Katz lost her grip on the bag, the cloth tearing from the tensile force, and in an instant was falling off the ladder. She was weightless, air whipping her stained nightgown about while she plummeted. A pit formed in my stomach when I saw where she would land, the inevitable becoming more terrifying with each second. Flat. One of the short concrete bird baths that had a pointed house had completely pierced the abdomen of the elderly woman. I stood frozen while I processed what was happening. Not a single cry was uttered. Her death was instant. A hole the size of a basketball oozing blood. Where her stomach had been made me fall to my knees and retch into the grass. Grabbed my phone and dialed 911 as I started, frantically, searching for my dinky-ass Walgreens first aid kit. An operator picked up. The operator asked in a calm voice, 11, what is your emergency? My neighbor is dead. She fell off a ladder and impaled herself on a bird bath. I yelled, panting as I sprinted down the sidewalk. The operator was clearly used to these kinds of calls. Okay, slow down, sir. What is the address? Redacted address. Please hurry, please. I stammered out as fast as I could. What is her name, sir? Katrina Katz. She's bleeding, please. Sir, is this a joke? What do you mean? I'm telling you the truth. I stopped in my tracks. I was so high on adrenaline, I couldn't understand what was happening. We've had at least 8 calls like this in the past year. Miss Katz has always been fine when we respond. I don't understand. She is an elderly lady who does not need this harassment. I will not repeat myself. If you call again, I am sending an officer to arrest you for misuse of the 911 line. Goodbye. The operator hung up. The only sound left was my heavy breathing. I found myself walking towards the backyard gate. My momentum was the only thing that kept me going. I pushed open the gate, scanning the backyard. There was no ladder lying on the ground. Miss Katz was gone. Somehow, she was not skewered on the bird bath as she had been a minute ago. I kept moving forward, unable to stop myself from approaching the bird bath. It was clean. Its undisturbed state mocked my fear and panic. There was no blood, but when I touched the concrete bird bathhouse, it was warm. I felt a pit in my stomach. The world was spinning around me. My head was pounding. "Dearie, what are you doing this time of night?" a sweet voice said. I whipped around. I felt like I was sinking into hysteria. The back door stood open, the wooden arch frame filled by Miss Katz's figure. There was no obvious sign of a gaping stomach wound. She appeared to have just woken up. She was looking at me, concern plain on the wrinkles of her face. I could see into the house. A few old lamps were turned on. I could just make out some ornate furniture covered in dust. The inside of the house certainly matched the outside. There was something that caught my eye. It was one of the large fertilizer bags with the purple flower logo, torn open and spilling over a wooden table onto the floor. The bag was not full of black soil. The bag was full of bright flesh, indiscriminate chunks glistening in the lamplight. "Dear," I said, "are you okay?" Miss Katz yelled, snapping my eyes away from the bag of flesh. She was no longer a sweet old woman who wanted to make sure I was all right. Her yellow eyes were strained open, demanding an answer from me. An explanation, I thought. I stood there, mouth working. I couldn't think. I heard some commotion. I wanted to make sure everything was all right. I stammered out. It seemed impossible that I was talking to someone whom I had just seen die. I felt nauseous. Doubt was flooding my mind. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Miss Katz's face eased into her usual sweet smile. "No commotion, dearie. I promise you everything is all right. Go back home and get some rest. I am sure you will forget all about it in the morning." She looked at me, still smiling, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "It's late. People go missing at night, so you'd better be careful." She turned and slammed the door. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I turned on every light in the house and locked myself in my bedroom. I played the events of the night over and over again in my head. Every time I convinced myself it was real, I would convince myself I must have dreamed it. I had some kind of lucid nightmare, but nightmares don't leave 911 calls on your phone history or dirt strung throughout your house. Nightmares don't live next door. In my shaken state come morning, the only thing to do was to go to work. Work was consistent, and I figured it would sort things out for me to pretend everything was normal. After I downed a third cup of coffee, I strode out the door. The sun catching on morning fog welcomed me to a new day. Todd stepped out of his door right after me. We nodded to each other. Todd's expression soured when he saw something behind me. "None of my damn business." Todd grumbled around a cigarette in his lips. I turned to see what he had seen. A van with a large purple flower logo was backed up to Ms. Katz's house. A few men unloading fertilizer bags. A part of me wanted to be drawn back into the events of last night. I pushed it down. I decided Todd was right. It was not any of my business. A full day of work set me back to a sense of normalcy. Pushing pencils for 8 hours really clears your mind. That night was silent, and I slept sounder than a hibernating bear without the need for a white noise machine. I waved to Miss Katz. when I saw her on my excursions out of the house. She often was garbed in gardening clothes, going in and out of her backyard. None of my business. For 6 days, all was well. Until I woke up 3 nights ago, soaked in sweat, muffled screaming filling my room. I once had a friend of mine lose his arm. We were playing on some rocks in a forest during a camping trip, jumping back and forth between larger boulders, taking turns giving chase to one another. I was laughing while I chased my friend, both of us grinning ear to ear while we played. My friend was climbing higher and higher up the slope of the mountain, taking each gap in one big stride at a time, taunting me to catch him. Just before my little pointer finger could reach out and tag him, he lost his footing and slipped. I watched as my friend fell towards the ground below and stood frozen as he began screaming in pain. Bloody arm raised in the air, bone snapped in half at the forearm, sharp white bone dangling in 2 directions. I had never heard so much pain expressed before. My friend screamed until his voice was raw, thrashing about on a rock below. If I had acted sooner, running down the mountain to grab our parents, my friend might have saved his arm. But as a kid, I just stood frozen to the spot, unable to move. I was frozen then, in my bed, as I listened to the pain unfolding before me. Help me, please. Oh God, oh God. It was muffled. The words could just barely be made out, but the pain was sharp and visceral. A part of me wanted to roll over, turn on the white noise machine, and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I knew what I was going to do. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, forcing myself to take one step after another towards the house next door. There was no doubt this time. This was real. I needed to be braver, to not freeze, to help this person. The screaming grew clearer as I approached the house, slid through the gate, and approached the back door. I'm so sorry. I promise. The voice screeched. It was definitely coming from her house. I had to stop whatever was going on. I reached for the door, knife held at the ready, swallowing when my hand grabbed the knurled knob and began to twist. I can't. The yelling suddenly cut off. Stillness now deafening. Somehow, the hinges of the door slid across each other smoothly, silently revealing the darkness of the house. Once inside, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding as quietly as possible. I moved through the room, past the old furniture, subconsciously aware of the bags of flesh strewn about, of the smell of death so rank I would normally empty the contents of my stomach, passing old pieces of furniture covered in must. I found myself walking on kitchen tile, then rounding a doorway to face a steep wooden stairway. Time started falling forward on a fixed track. I was floating up the stairs. I barely noticed the loud thud that sounded like a deflated basketball being dropped. Heat radiated from above. I was entering a tropical oven. The plaster of the walls was damp and rotted, wood molding visible in bare patches. A squelching noise started coming from upstairs and washing down over me. I continued to move slowly towards the noise. At the top of the stairs was a hallway with closed side rooms and an open door at the end of the hall. The room behind the door illuminated by a sickly yellow ceiling light, creeping out into the hall. Before I knew it, I swung the door open, revealing the horrible scene inside. It has taken me these days since that night to rationalize what I saw behind the door at the end of the hallway. In the moment my brain put my body into shock, I continued to act, but I was not comprehending how absolutely horrifying it all was. The floor was covered in dirt and flesh. The two substances were mixed together to form a paste that was thick and gelatinous. Miss Katz's head was staring at me, upside down in the moosh, eyeless sockets fixed in my direction. The decapitated head looked something like a pale jack-o'-lantern after weeks in the sun. All of the flesh had been scooped out from the inside. I could see through the eye sockets into the pale skull. The base of the head, where the neck should be, revealed a perfectly calcified circle that looked like a doll head might when you wrung it off of the body. A spacious cavity where a brain should be. I peeled my eyes from the ground and looked forward. A table was in the middle of the room. The rest of Miss Katz was hunched over the table, sitting on an old wooden stool. Her body was convulsing, as something I couldn't see was ripping into the chest of a dead body sprawled on the table. It must have been the person I had gone to save. Slurping and crunching filled the room. There was screaming. It took me a second to realize that I was screaming. Slowly, the rest of Miss Katz sat up from the table in the chair, out of the stump of her neck. What looked like a slender frayed rope started stretching upward towards the ceiling. Brown and glistening like an insect carapace. Slowly its head started rising from the dead body on the table, pulled upward until it was almost touching the ceiling. Tendrils roughly a foot in length sprouted like fuzzy antennas in all directions along the vine-like neck. They constantly moved and twitched as they felt their surroundings. The head was covered in the same wriggly feelers, blacker than those on the neck. Once the head had risen almost 5 feet in the air, towering above me as an unholy obelisk. It twisted around to stare down at me. Insect mandibles twitched and chomped, flesh smeared and stuck to the mouth area, falling down to the ground with thick splashes. The head was smaller than the discarded shell of a head on the ground by my feet. But the eyes were the same. The yellow eyes were large, bulging out of the hard carapace, with no eyelids to conceal their bulbous shape. Its eyes were fixed on me, pure malice penetrating me to my core. The next few moments occurred in the blink of an eye. Rapidly, the tendrils of the neck started pulling the creature back into Ms. Katz. Each tendril would shoot down into the old woman's body, accelerating the head downward. Sporadic jerks animated her corpse, arms shooting out, a seizure of movements unfolding before me, until the insectoid head was the only visible part of the parasite, resting on the body's neck stump. All was still. A standoff had begun. In shock, I was rooted to the spot. A pit of dread opened up in my stomach, and I became aware of my heart pounding in my ears. It leapt toward me, pushing off the ground so hard I heard the floor break, crashing into me with force enough to break my ribs, sending us hurtling back through the hallway towards the stairs. On the ground, we struggled. I somehow managed to grab its shoulders and pushed with all of my strength as it tried to pop my head open with its layers of jaws. A full-throated roar came out of me, and I heaved us down the stairs. Each step smacked on the way down. At the bottom, I rolled into the kitchen onto my back. I had broken ribs and an ankle twisted the wrong direction, so all I could do was crawl backwards from the stairwell door, where I could hear snapping sounds that meant it was getting up. It forced Miss Katz's body to its feet, one arm dislocated and jutting upward, standing naked in the dark doorway. A fleshy stomach hole was filled with twisted knots of insectoid spaghetti, where the bird bath had pierced through the body. Its eyes were 2 yellow orbs of light, swaying back and forth in the darkness of the doorway. I noticed a shovel at my feet, and frantically grabbed for it. I was too late. In the same moment I made my move, some of the knotted tendrils of Miss Katz's stomach wound, shot out towards me. The wet tendrils were thick and flew across the kitchen, striking my left shoulder and digging into my flesh. The muscles of the arm seized. My muscles were forced to contract harder than my brain would allow. Every single muscle cramped at the same time. My biceps relaxed as my triceps continued to flex, which caused my arm to hyperextend. Bones cracked, and my arm broke. I cried out in pain. "Oh, dearie, I love the way you scream." It spoke to me with a voice that was broken, full of hateful mirth. It sounded like Miss Katz was speaking while gargling crumbled bones. Suddenly my biceps flexed, snapping my arm the other way, my limp hand smacking into my shoulder. All I could do was grind my teeth and moan. With my free arm holding the shovel, I swung at the tendrils, severing them. It let out an ear-blistering screech, insectoid head thrashing. Enraged, it crouched, then lunged for me once more. I was ready this time. Screaming my throat raw, I swung the shovel and hit it right between its eyes. One instant, the shiny black mouth was going to tear my throat out. The next, the carapace exploded. Green slop flying in all directions. The body went limp and oozed all over me, tendrils seeping out over me onto the ground. The pungent smell of Miss Katz's body, old perfume, and rotting insect meat singed my nostrils. I could barely breathe with all of the weight bearing down on me. My shock wore off, and panic set in. I frantically tried to push the corpse off of me, my hands slipping again and again, suffocating, instigated desperation deep within me, allowing me to drain the last of my strength, to finally roll it off myself. Then I lay alone in the silent house. I started sobbing. I took massive, uncontrollable heaves of air into my body and let them out through tears and groans. I could not stop until every last possible emotion had been wailed out of me. Once I was done, I stood numbly, used the shovel to limp my way out of the house and packed a bag. I got into my car and rode out at dawn. After a stop at the local urgent care, where I told a true enough story about a bad fall down some stairs, I had a boot for my foot and bandages for my ribs. I drove as far as I could and stopped at a motel. 3 days later, I am now writing from my third motel, slowly making my way back home, where I'm going to try to forget all of this mess and start over. I am not sure what happened to Miss Katz's house or the bodies inside, and I don't care. I needed to tell my story online because no one I know will believe me, and because I am not sure if I will live to tell the tale anyway. Every motel that I have stopped at has the same van that parks in the back of the lot at 3 a.m. when I should be asleep and not notice. A van with a purple flower logo. They leave at 6 a.m. before I should wake up. I noticed each time because I have not slept since that night. I know I have nightmares waiting for me when I finally crash, but I am not ready to face them yet. Story number 3. I found the dead man washed up on the beach on my third day at the new job. My first day was almost as bad. They didn't want me, and they wouldn't like me. I knew all of that going in. What I didn't expect was getting the silent treatment from every other ranger at the park. "You shouldn't take it personally, Ranger McCoy," the head ranger told me as I closed the door to his office. Everyone here was just expecting Marco to get the position. He was a great intern. George was middle-aged, with a black beard going gray at the edges. His office was full of old pottery, stone tools, and the top third of an entire wall was devoted to Native American weavings, particularly dream catchers, each one larger and stranger than the last. I nodded toward the dream catchers. "Are those local?" I asked. George beamed, clearly proud of the collection. "All of them, yes. Most were made right here on the island. Are they old?" "Some of them are darn near ancient." I smiled politely. My smile faded when I noticed one large dream catcher in the corner. At least I assumed it was a dream catcher. It had the typical spiderweb swirl, but instead of being a flat circle, it was three-dimensional, closer to a globe. The material used in the weave appeared unusual as well. It wasn't string or twine, but more leathery, rough, and not at all pleasant to look at. "Very unique," I said. "Hey, I have a question if you don't mind." "Shoot." I leaned in. "Are the stories about the park true?" "Which stories?" "That the park is haunted. Ghosts in the woods, shadows in the water, and campers going missing now and then. Is any of that?" George shook his head. "I know everyone loves a ghost story, but the scariest thing you'll encounter at Snowfall is a pissed-off pony." He turned his attention to my open resume on his desk. "This is a pretty solid pedigree here, Ranger." "Thank you, sir." "Don't do the sir thing here. The team is already inclined not to like you, sorry to say. And if you call me sir, they'll think you're sucking up. You can just call me George, and please sit down. You're making me nervous." I sat. "Okay, George. I'd rather go by Ashley then." "Why exactly do you want to work at Snowfall, Ranger McCoy?" "I don't." George raised a bushy eyebrow. "I mean, I don't have any issue working here." I explained. "I'm happy to. It seems like a great park, and I like being by the ocean. Actually, I used to come here a lot as a kid. But you don't want to work here." I didn't request being placed here. That's what I was trying to say. People here, you know, I'm sure they probably think that I stole your intern Marco's promotion, but I had nothing to do with the assignment. The older ranger was silent. He leaned back in his chair. I'd never seen anyone working so hard to look relaxed, and I had no idea why. George smiled and nodded. "I'm sure you're a hard worker and a heck of a ranger. We're just a little unique at Snowfall. And prior to the current superintendent, we kept a lot of say locally in choosing our rangers. Marco was with us for 2 years, between seasonal and probational, and all of that. He had a lot of friends here, but they're good folks, and I know they won't hold it against you." But they did. There were 3 other full-time rangers other than George at Snowfall. Directly under George was the assistant head ranger, Jennifer. She was about the same age as her boss, and had a presence I would describe as matronly. Gabe was in charge of the camping areas and supervised seasonal rangers in the summer. Other than maybe myself, he was the youngest of the Snowfall Shore group. I doubted he was more than 25, tall and thin and animated when chatting with the other rangers. Then there was Peter. While George was polite, but distant, and Jennifer and Gabe were just distant, Peter radiated hostility. Other than the collective cold shoulder, and George disappearing after our conversation, my first day was uneventful. No one gave me anything to work, or a place to work, so I spent the day getting familiar with the park, and wondering how many years I'd need to endure at Snowfall before I could fuck off to bigger and better things. With no assignments, or even trainings, I decided to spend my second day exploring the park. There was a spider web of trails crossing Snowfall, centered around half a dozen small inlets. I chose a trail at random that ran through the woods near the office and set off on a hike. My goal was to see one of the infamous snowfall ghosts. Stories claimed that hundreds of lost souls, many drowning victims from centuries of shipwrecks, wandered the park. When I was a kid, one of my friends told me they'd personally seen a specter, a faceless woman wailing and stumbling around the North Beach at night. I didn't see any ghosts, but I did encounter something that made my skin crawl. It was a tiny stick figure shaped like a person hanging from an elm right next to the trail. A tiny scrap of green fishing net was wrapped around the totem's head like a mask. The object swung gently from a long piece of twine that was tied around the lowest branch of the tree. I chalked it up to eccentric campers just being weird. One other moment stood out from that trip through the forest. I rounded a bend to find a large rabbit in the middle of the trail. It had black fur and the brightest blue eyes I'd ever seen. And right in the center of each sapphire eye, a black iris big enough for me to identify even at a distance. The creature stood up when it noticed me, paws in the air. It looked to be nearly the size of a small cat. Hello, Bunny, I said, trying not to startle it. Do you live around here? The rabbit stood completely still, watching me. Then one sharp ear twitched, and it raced away faster than shadows in a basement when you flipped the light switch. Bye, Bunny, I said. The rabbit's blue eyes stayed with me. There was something unnatural about them. The blueness reminded me of the ocean on a clear day. The dark irises like where the water goes from shore shallow to open deep. I looked back over the ocean before returning to HQ. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something in the water. A shadow like a fish just under the surface. But the silhouette was too large to be an animal. I decided it was a shadow from one of the clouds above me. Then I turned around and quickly walked toward the office, the rabbit's eyes blazing in my memory. I got back to HQ around lunchtime, hurrying at the end because the sky was beginning to look a little dark. The other rangers were gathered around Jennifer's desk when I walked in. They were watching the radar. A wall of red was barreling down on the park, only a few hours away. For my first official assignment, George tasked me with riding along with Peter to pick up a spare generator from the equipment shed. Peter didn't say a word to me for most of the trip. Despite my hammering him with small talk, we passed a small group, hiking one of the trails on our way. 2 kids, and I assumed their parents. The foursome waved as we drove by. Peter surprised me by waving back. Friends of yours? I asked. Regulars. The Roberts family. They stay here every year. Dad is into fly fishing. Mom is a marine biologist. Nice folks. When we got back to headquarters, George thanked me and then told me to take the rest of the day, as well as the next day, off. We'll just be doing storm cleanup, he told me. No need for the full crew. We'll see you again the day after tomorrow. I decided on my drive home that even if I wasn't working, I wanted to spend more time getting familiar with the park. So I woke up while it was still dark the next morning, drank 3 cups of coffee, and headed to Snowfall to explore more of the trails. I figured I'd start the day by watching the sunrise. The office parking lot was half empty when I pulled in, which was strange, but I assumed the rangers on duty were out dealing with storm damage. I left my truck and took a short hike through the wooded area between our headquarters and the nearest slice of beach. The light was gray in the pre-dawn, made worse by the lingering clouds and a light drizzle. There were little stick men and stick women, and some that might have been animals, all hanging near the trail. Here and there, The stick figures had those tiny strips of old fishing net covering their faces. Halfway through the hike, I failed to spot roots winding across the path and nearly rolled my ankle. Shit, fuck, ouch. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. When I did, I noticed that I had zero service despite having full bars back at the office. I remembered George's advice about always taking a radio out into the park and considered turning back, but I wasn't sure if he meant even when I was off duty. If I break my leg, I'll just yell super loud, I promised myself. The rest of the trip to the beach was smoother with a light. My only regret was not wearing a better jacket since the rain was picking up. I stepped onto the sand, boots crunching as I rounded the first set of tall dunes. My eyes were on the ocean, a darker shade of gray than the sky above it. Whitecaps grew and broke and grew again, while the wind snatched spray from the tips of waves. I could see the water clearly. The highest edge of the sun was already past the horizon. I shivered against the chill, lost in thought and staring at the seas. There were gulls crying all around me. I didn't notice the other birds among them until I saw a large shadow drift across the sand. I looked up to see buzzards coasting among the gulls, heavy and slow with those raw, red heads. Whatever the vultures were circling was just around the next cluster of dunes. I picked up my pace, worried that I'd find one of the island's famous ponies dead or dying. Once I was clear of the dunes, I saw the body. 3 vultures stood hunched next to the corpse. I was too far to be certain, but I was pretty sure at first glance that I was seeing a dead man washed ashore. The body was facing the water, dressed in waterlogged clothes that looked like what you'd find on a lot of day hikers and campers. As I approached, I heard the dull hum of flies. A buzzard and half a dozen seagulls took off when I came closer. I stopped 20 feet or so from the body, worried that I might already be disturbing the scene. But I wanted to at least see who the man was. An irrational fear that I might know the victim caused me to move in a wide circle, so that I was nearly standing in the water and able to see the man's face. Except there was nothing there. The face was gone, peeled away to reveal bloody muscle and the hint here and there of bone. There were no features left, nothing but an open wound from his hairline down to his jaw. What the fuck? I threw up, turning away so it landed in the ocean. Shaking, I moved away from the corpse, not stopping until I was nearly back to the dunes. I sat in the sand and pulled out my phone, dialing 911 without taking my eyes off the body. The vultures and gulls were back, pecking and pulling. The flies had never left. The call didn't connect, so I tried again and again. I was breathing heavily when I dialed for a 4th time, almost on the edge of hyperventilation. It was too surreal, like a nightmare that lingered after waking. I kept shooting glances at the dead body, terrified that it might have rolled over while I wasn't watching. Taking a deep breath, I forced my eyes closed and counted to 10. When I opened them, the body was exactly where it had been since I walked onto the beach. I felt myself calming down and realized that my calls weren't going to get through. There was zero service on the beach. I'd have to go back to the office for help. I took one last look at the body sprawled on the beach, then took off, running over the dunes. The morning drizzle was turning back into rain by the time I reached the woods between the beach and headquarters. Even though the sun was up, it was darker than before dawn. I stumbled through the forest, tripping over roots and rocks. At one point, I almost ran eye first into one of the little stick men that was hanging above the trail. There were a few more trucks in the parking lot when I got back to headquarters. I nearly crashed into Gabe when I ran through the door. I'd taken the last quarter mile of the return at a sprint and stood, winded and drenched, trying to convey to Gabe, through a series of coughs and gestures, that there was a dead body on the North Beach. Jennifer rounded the corner with a cup of coffee and watched me breathlessly, pantomiming for a moment. Then she handed me the coffee, forced me to sit down, brought me a towel, and made me dry off and steady my breathing before telling my story. Dead man. North Beach, I wheezed. Near Trailhead. He's been mutilated. Gabe's eyes went wide. Mutilated? How? Take your time, Jennifer added, passing me another towel. Breathe. The body is bloated but fresh. His face is gone. Missing. Removed, I think. Gabe whistled. Fucking crabs around here. Vicious pricks. I shivered. I don't think it was crabs or vultures or any animal that did it. Everything was too precise. Too many straight lines. Too clean. Do you need another towel? Jennifer asked. Or a blanket? I shook my head. I'm okay. We need to call the police. Jennifer and Gabe exchanged a look. What? I asked. We're in DNR's jurisdiction, Jennifer said, heading for the radio room. We should start with the natural resource police, but this storm has them running around all over the island. Let me call George. Fine. But we need to be out there with the body to make sure the scene isn't disturbed. Gabe tilted his head toward the window. The rain had gone from a downpour to a solid wall of water. It lashed the windows and drummed the roof. A gust of wind shook headquarters, filling the building with a sound between a howl and a rasping whistle. The scene is already going to be disturbed, Gabe said. No real reason for us to drown standing out there waiting. I shook my head. I found him. I'm staying with him. Come with me or stay here. Either's fine. Just call it in. Just did. Jennifer returned with an extra rain parka and radio. She handed me both. I'll go with you. Gabe sighed, but shrugged on his poncho and grabbed a set of truck keys. Just let me heat up some fucking coffee for the road, and I'm with you. I don't understand. What? Gabe asked. I raised my voice, trying to speak over the roar of the rain. I said, I don't understand. The body was right here. 15 minutes after leaving headquarters, the three of us were standing on the beach, using the dunes for a windbreak. It didn't help much. The storm was whipping sand and water across the shore, while the rain came down nearly sideways. Temperatures were dropping, and the sky and ocean were the same violent gray. The corpse I'd found earlier, with its face removed, was missing. Jennifer took a step closer to me, shouting over the wind. Are you sure this is the spot? Could it be further north? No, I'm positive it was here by the trailhead. Shit. Why did you need to stop for coffee? Gabe held up his hands. 1, it's miserable out here. And 2, it's not like the body got up and walked off the beach. Maybe he washed away, I guessed, scanning the beach again. I became aware of a soft rumble getting louder, too quiet and too mechanical to be thunder or the crash of waves. George rounded the corner of the dunes on a four-wheeler, followed a moment later by Peter on another ATV. Both had their parka hoods cinched tight against the wind. Everyone okay? George asked. We were up north when we heard the call. Living the dream? Gabe replied. I shot him a hard look. Did you guys see the body? I was sure it would be right here, but, maybe I got mixed up in the storm. It's close, though. I'm sure of that. No dead folks on the beach between here and Point Bay, Peter replied. "We'll check south for a quarter mile or so." George told me. "I'm sure we'll find it." "You are?" Peter asked. I got ready to snap back, but saw George stare Peter down. The younger ranger shifted uncomfortably on his four-wheeler. "Okay, yeah, we'll find it," Peter promised. "Hell, I've been here 9 years and never found so much as a dead tourist in a bathhouse. You're here 2 days, and you already discovered a body on the beach. Some people have all the luck." "I guess," I said, but Peter was already driving off, disappearing into the rain and ocean mist. "You did good," George told me. "We'll find the scene, and then get MRP over here in 2 shakes." He took off after Peter. I stood watching until both were out of sight. It didn't take long. Even their tired tracks in the sand faded under the relentless drag of the wind. In less than a minute, it was like the 2 rangers had never been there at all. "Come on," Jennifer shouted, tugging the arm of my parka. "Let's get back to the truck before we drown." A deep rumble made me look around, expecting to see George or Peter zooming back to tell us they'd found the body. But this time, the rumble was thunder, followed quickly by a blue-black flash of lightning that connected the ocean and the sky like some bright skeleton tree. I hurried after Jennifer and Gabe. We lost power almost as soon as we got back to headquarters. Luckily, the backup generator was easy to get going. Gabe put on a new pot of coffee, and the 3 of us stood looking out the windows at a scene that might have seemed familiar to Noah. "What in the hell kind of spring storm is this?" I asked. "It almost seems like an early hurricane." "Very early," Gabe muttered. Something about the tone of his voice caused me to raise an eyebrow, but he just shrugged and handed me a mug of coffee. "You must have been a barista in a former life," I said. "Sometimes feels like in this life, too." "Maybe we should call DNR now," I said, resisting the urge to pace. "Get them over here to help look for the body." Jennifer put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I'm sure George and Peter have already found it. They're probably calling it in already, then we'll head right back. Drink up. Gabe's not good for much, but he brings in the good coffee from home." I smiled and took a sip. It was pretty good. "I have to bring in my own stuff," Gabe said. "You could strip paint with the shit they stock in the break room for free." "Damn budget cuts. You spoil us," Jennifer teased. "And on your own dime." What can I say? I'm a giver. Gabe put his hand next to his mouth to fake whisper to me. But I steal so many office supplies to make up the difference. I built my nephew a playhouse just using stacks of Post-its. I chuckled, smiling for the first time since I'd found the faceless man. But again, the memory of the body came back as red and raw as its wounds. The white gulls circling, hard to see against the rain-swollen clouds above them. And the fat black horseflies buzzing and crawling across the pink muscle of a wave of sudden exhaustion made me bend over, causing me to spill my drink. "Ashley? Ash, are you okay?" Jennifer asked, moving next to me. "Fine," I lied. "I'm fine. I just might need to sit for a second. Gabe, go grab her a chair." "No, not that one. The one from George's office. The comfy one. And get her another cup of coffee." George and Peter coasted into the parking lot on their ATVs before I finished my next mug. I stood up immediately, nearly vibrating as the pair fought the wind to get the door open, and then closed again. "Jesus," Peter gasped, peeling off his rain parka and collapsing into the nearest chair. "It's getting biblical out there." "Well," I asked, looking between the two, "where did you find him?" The two rangers shared a look. What? I demanded. Why don't we talk in my office? George suggested. Look, I'm not crazy, I said. I didn't imagine a dead body out there this morning. Nobody is saying that. George promised. Peter cleared his throat but stopped when Jennifer glared. There's a dead man out there, I said. Missing his face? Peter asked. Yes, fucking yes. I know how it sounds, but that's what I saw. You're sure? George asked. You don't have any doubts at all? None. Zero. I'd swear on my life. George sighed and sat down, signaling Jennifer and Gabe to find chairs so we'd all be seated in a rough circle. Ashley, I want you to know that I believe that you saw something out on the beach. I bristled. I know what I saw. I saw... George held up his hand to finish. Look, storms like this, no visibility. Rain coming down like heaven sprung a leak. It wasn't raining like this when I found the body, I said, trying to keep a growing tint of anger out of my voice. True, George admitted. True, but it was raining, and there was mist. The cold fog that rolls off the ocean here in the morning. It plays tricks on even us old-timers. Heck, this whole island is a little... weird. Haunted, even. Maybe. Spooky as all get out. Gabe agreed. I took a deep breath. I didn't see a ghost. I didn't imagine anything. There's a dead man out there. And if you're not calling the police, I will. I got ready to stand up, but felt faint again, dropping back into my chair. Are you okay? Jennifer asked. You look tired. You do, George agreed. This has been a heck of a morning. Why don't you lie down in the break room for a bit? My head was swimming. I took a long drink of coffee and rubbed my eyes. I'm not going to sleep. Not until I talk to the cops. What channel is NRP on the radio? Peter was watching me. For some reason, I thought he looked curious more than anything. It's no good calling, he said. The natural resource guys and girls are all busy this morning with the storm and looking for the missing camper. Missing camper? I asked, stumbling a little over the last word. I was actually feeling tired, damn near exhausted. Peter, George said quietly. Come on, boss. You know she's not letting it go. Peter gave me a sad smile. Dr. Roberts went missing last night. She wasn't at her family's campsite this morning. Might have wandered off. Roberts? I drawled. It was almost like I was drunk. The biologist? Marine biologist, Peter corrected. Nice lady. It's a shame. The room was spinning and the rain sounded far, far away. Something not right, I said, using the back of my chair as support while I tried to stand. The empty coffee mug slipped out of my now numb fingers. Jennifer caught me as I fell. You really should have taken George's offer and slept today off, she said, helping me back to my chair. She should have stayed the hell home, Peter muttered. She shouldn't be here, George. It's not right. George was watching me, expressionless. His blue eyes seemed as gray as the ocean in the rain. Coming in on your day off, he said. That's dedication. My last memory in the headquarters before the room went black was George disappearing into his office and several hands laying me gently on the floor. The universe shook. I woke up feeling like I was drowning. Cold water splashed over my face and I turned away, only to feel more water. For a panicked moment I was certain I was drowning. Then something soft, warm and damp wiped my face. Do you think that's helping? I heard Gabe ask. The towel is soaked. Just focus on driving and don't let us fucking capsize, Peter replied. I opened my eyes, blinking against the rain. My vision was gray at first. As it cleared, I realized it was just the world that was gray. I was half sitting, half lying in a small boat, rocking in the storm. As I tried to pull myself into a more comfortable position, I found that my arms were handcuffed behind my back, and my legs were bound at the ankle. What the... I slurred, still groggy. "Sleeping Beauty is awake," Gabe said from somewhere behind me. Peter was kneeling next to me. He leaned over to help me sit up straight, but didn't say anything. I did my best to get a full look at my surroundings. George was also in the boat, sitting near the bow, staring out across the water. There was a woman slumped behind him. It took me a moment to recognize Dr. Roberts, since she was bundled up in a ranger park. Hey, but there was no mistaking the blonde hair plastered across her face. The boat hit a wave and thumped down hard, causing the woman to slide. I realized that she was unconscious. "What the fuck is going on?" I mumbled. The wind snatched my voice away, but Peter understood my look of confusion. "It's okay," he shouted above the storm. "We're almost at the cove. It will be calmer there. You're okay." I tried to move, to struggle against the cuffs, but I was so tired. The best I could do was hunch over to keep the worst of the rain out of my eyes. Peter shifted and leaned toward me. The wind and rain let up ever so slightly. I don't remember most of the boat ride. I might have passed out again. Or maybe there just wasn't much to remember, other than the rain and the occasional roar of thunder, and the endless gray above and below. Eventually, the boat stopped jumping and the wind died down until it was not much more than a heavy breeze. I sat up straight and looked around. Our boat was coasting across calm waters, a smudge of shoreline just visible maybe 300 or 400 yards away. "This cove isn't on any of the maps," George said without turning around. I was surprised that I could hear him so clearly. The storm was barely above a spring bluster in the cove, though I could still see it raging dark and cold behind us, where a break in the beach led back to the open ocean. "Where are we?" I asked, glad to hear my voice was back and the fog was lifting from my mind. "What are you doing?" George turned around, and I'm not sure if I've ever seen a man in his middle years look so old. "I'm giving you a choice, Ashley. A terrible, unforgivable choice. But I'm afraid it's the only one I can offer you. It's one we knew we'd need her to make eventually," Gabe said. George leaned back and looked up at the clouds. "True, but it should have been years from now. The time when we could have prepared her, made her understand. Shit, remember how long it took you to understand, Peter?" Peter didn't reply. He was watching me and looked sad. "It should have been Marco," Gabe said. "That's the whole point of the damn internship. Did you ever find out what happened?" George turned, searching for something. "He had a breakdown. Killed himself last night. I just got the call this morning." "Damn," Gabe said, crossing himself. "Poor little guy." Peter closed his eyes. "What is happening? Tell me what the hell is happening," I demanded. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to," George replied. He stood up and waved twice. I followed his gaze and saw that a second small boat, identical to our own, had anchored about 30 yards away. Even in the drizzle, I could clearly make out Jennifer sitting in the vessel, pointing a rifle at us. At me, I realized. "She's pointing that at me." George sat down. "Jenny is just there for insurance, but she's a crackerjack shot, so please don't do anything." Sudden, I swallowed and stayed quiet. He continued. "What I'm about to tell you, Ashley, it's going to sound, well, it's going to sound crazier than a loony bin in an earthquake, but it's the truth, and I promise you'll believe me, and I'm very sorry for that." The Roberts woman was waking up slowly, groaning. Miss? Dr. Roberts? Can you hear me? I said. Ma'am, you're going to be okay. We're fine. George smiled. Good makings of a ranger. I knew it as soon as I saw you. But, and I'm eternally sorry for this, only one of you is going to be fine. I felt like I'd fallen into a tub of ice. I could hear my pulse thumping in my ears, and my mouth was suddenly dry. You don't have to hurt anyone, I whispered. Whatever this is, you don't have to. True, George agreed, but you do. He turned his back to me and began rummaging around in the storage area at the bow. Briefly, I considered throwing myself at him. Maybe I could knock him overboard if I took him by surprise, but I felt Peter shifting next to me, maybe sensing the adrenaline firing through my bloodstream. And then there was Gabe behind me, and of course Jennifer nearby with her rifle ready. I slumped, realizing that whatever was about to happen, there wasn't anything I could do to change it. George turned around, holding 2 duffel bags. They were olive green, bland, the kind that you could find in any army surplus store in the country. He set the bags down next to the captive woman. First, I do want you to know you're not at all crazy, the old ranger told me. You did find a body on the beach this morning. I apologize for lying to you, but you weren't supposed to see that. The whole reason I gave you off was to keep you away from the park today. Sure is bad luck you came in anyway, and worse luck you couldn't be talked out of pulling the cops into this. You moved the body? Yep, me and Peter, while the others kept you occupied. We were out looking for the guy anyway. We knew he'd be washing up. You knew? Did you... Are you the one who... George nodded. Killed him? Technically, no, it was Gabe's turn. But from a philosophical point of view, we're all guilty of it. Why? I whispered. We had to. We have to send one down every 3 or 4 years. George splashed the surface of the water with his fingertips. It used to be only once a decade or so when I was younger, but she's been restless lately. I don't understand. There's a thing sleeping under the water here. We think it's probably at the bottom of this cove, but it might be somewhere deeper. All I'm sure of is that this little inlet is a special place. The weather's always nicer here, and this is where she likes her meals. I kept glancing at Dr. Roberts. Her eyes were flickering behind closed lids. She'd be conscious any moment. Who is she? I asked. George was staring into the water. I'm not actually sure she is a she. That's just the impression that I got the one time I communicated with her. You'll see what I mean. I scooted closer to the head ranger. Listen, whatever this is, the woman is still out cold. Drop her off on the shore. Just let her go. I don't think you want to make that choice quite yet. George replied. This will be easier if I just show you. He opened the first duffel bag. I've been saying just show her from the beginning, Gabe said. Rip off the Band-Aid. She needed context, George countered, pulling a clear plastic box from the bag. It looked like a shadow box, the large, clear plastic kind you'd use to display an autographed football or basketball. There was something large and flat inside the case. George held it closer. Take a look, Ashley. This is some kind of insanely tasteless prank, right? I asked, glancing around the boat. Or are you all completely fucking nuts, Ashley? George repeated, bringing the box closer. Look, I did. For a long moment, every thought left my head. Then one came rushing back in, and I couldn't stop screaming. Inside the box was a face, pulled tight and hung on thin wires. The eyes and mouth were open holes, the cheeks pale but remarkably lifelike. There was even a hint of a 5 o'clock shadow on his jaw. Though I'd never seen the dead man on the beach while he was whole, I was certain I was looking at his well-preserved face. I turned away to throw up over the side of the boat. Gentle but insistent hands pushed my temples so that I was facing the box again. "I'm sorry," Peter said, "but you have to see all of it." No. I jammed my eyes shut. George sighed. "Either open your eyes or I'm going to have to push Dr. Roberts into the water." Whimpering, I slowly opened my eyes to look at the face. It was moving. I stared, unable to understand what was happening. The dead man's mouth was opening and shaking, while his face convulsed. It was as if he were silently screaming. "Jesus God," I whispered. "What? How?" George, thankfully, returned the box to the duffel bag. "As I'm sure you guessed, that belongs to the fella you found this morning. It was sitting still as a picture up until yesterday afternoon, when it all of a sudden started. Well, you saw. That's one of the signs that she's waking up. When we send one down to her, we're supposed to keep the faces. It's sick, but those are just the rules that got passed down. The face acts as a warning that the bitch is restless. That and the storm. Then it's time for a new sacrifice." "This is evil," I said. George nodded. "Maybe. But what we do here at Snowfall goes back a long time, Ashley. Like, before this was a park, before there was a town, even before the first Europeans built a couple of stick sheds and called it a colony. The local tribes were sending down sacrifices to keep this thing sleeping. One life every few years might be evil, but the last time something like her woke up, I understand a whole colony disappeared in North Carolina. This thing is ancient, Ashley, and it only tolerates us as long as we keep it fed and dreaming satisfied dreams." A sudden mad panic made me try to rip my hands through my cuffs. To hell with the bastards and Jennifer and her rifle. I would not let them skin me alive and throw me into the ocean. "Easy," Peter said, pinning my arms. "Easy, I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But everything he's saying is true." "You're all fucking crazy," I screamed, feeling like I was losing a grip on my own sanity. "You're sick. There's nothing down there. You're just murderers." George opened the second duffel bag. "I was hoping the face would be enough to convince you, but I understand it's a lot to take in." He pulled out a device made of sticks and what looked like strips of leather. I recognized it as the strange dream catcher from his office. "I'm sorry about this part," George said, placing the object over my head. "I'm sorry about all of this, but this in particular." "What are you—" The netting came down until my head was covered. Instantly, I knew I wasn't on the boat anymore. I was standing on a wide, black beach at night. The sky was clear but discolored, like a fresh bruise, slowly going purple. There was a full moon hanging above the horizon, but it was wrong, too. It was far too large, and seemed so close that I was worried it would fall into the ocean. There was only one star, a bright red one that I couldn't look at for long. It was like a wound just before it began to bleed. I shivered and crossed my arms. My cuffs were gone, and my legs were also free. It was cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt before. Despite the clear conditions, the ocean was rough. Whitecaps stood and hung and crashed down, breaking at the shoreline. There was something in the water, many things, people. Each was missing their face, but somehow all of them were screaming, clawing at the blank flesh where their faces should be. The sound was horrible, a muffled gurgle that was amplified to a buzzing wind by the hundreds or thousands of throats that were trying to shriek. A large wave pushed a dozen of the naked, squirming figures onto the beach. Most were stunned, but a few tried to crawl away. Before they could, a human hand the size of a small parking lot emerged from the water and raked the sand with fingers like huge, crooked trees. The miserable things were dragged back into the tide. Another gigantic hand was rising from the ocean, then a second, and a third. They towered above me, blocking out the light of the swollen moon. I screamed, and kept screaming as someone pulled the dream catcher from my head and shook me. Ashley, Ash, Peter's voice. It's okay. I know it's awful, but you're safe. You're not there. You're not there. Not yet, Gabe said. I opened my eyes to see Peter glaring at the other ranger. Gabe was looking out over the calm waters, an unlit cigarette in his mouth. He flicked his lighter and cupped his hands, but couldn't get it going in the drizzle. Sighing, Gabe tossed the cigarette into the ocean. Don't litter, George said, putting the twisted dream catcher back into the bag. You saw the beach, right? I was shaking uncontrollably, unable to answer. My screaming had woken Dr. Roberts. She was looking around the boat, confused, but growing more afraid by the moment. What's this? Where? She mumbled. Dan, the kids. I know what you saw, George said. We've all seen it too, this cove. I guess it's like a window, or better yet a doorway, to wherever fucked up place she calls home. We send her food, but not just to eat. She keeps them forever. She feeds on their pain and their minds and their memories. An ocean of screaming. Hell of a lullaby. Remember, I said that I'd need you to make a choice, Ashley. Now is the time. We do a terrible but necessary thing here. You weren't supposed to discover it so soon. But the cat's out of the bag. So now we all need to know you really have what it takes to be a park ranger at Snowfall. I shifted my gaze from George to the camper handcuffed next to him. No, I said. No. The old ranger held up his hands. That is one of the answers you can give. But I strongly suggest you take a moment to consider your situation. No matter what happens, the doctor here will be sent down. There's no way around that. You only get to decide if you are going to be the one to send her, or if you're going down with her. I'll give you 2 minutes to decide. What is going on? Let me go. The camper mumbled in a haze. George slipped a gag between her teeth. I'm sorry, Doc, but the ritual requires you to be awake. Bad luck. Try to put your mind in a happier place. Ashley, Potter said, leaning down to put his face close to mine. You have to do this. I can't, I whispered. I can't. If you don't, you see where you'll be going. I started sobbing, nearly hyperventilating, but he was right. The only thing I could imagine being worse than killing that poor woman was going into the water with her. So when George told me my time was up, and he offered me a bone-handled knife, I took it with the one hand they let free. Gabe and George dragged Dr. Roberts close to me and forced her head still while Peter kept one hand on my wrist, just in case I tried to stab one of them or myself. George told me what to do, where to cut, and Peter helped counter the shaking in my hand. Even with the gag, I'll never, until the day I die, forget the sound the camper made while I worked at her face. It's a sound I hear in my nightmares now, along with the buzz of flies and a wind that moans. When I was done, George placed the dream catcher over her head. Gabe and Peter tossed her, still screaming, over the side of the boat. As soon as she hit the water, the remains of the storm began to clear. By the time we made it back to headquarters, the sun was shining brightly, and the air smelled like it had the edge of summer on it, clean and warm. No one spoke a word the entire trip back. They let me loose from my bonds. Gabe even offered me a cigarette. Peter had to light it for me. I was shaking too badly to use the lighter. He also helped me collapse into a chair when we were back in the office and brought me a blanket. George brought me a mug of tea that smelled like honeysuckle and citrus. I eyed the cup suspiciously. George laughed. "Don't worry. Nothing in your drink this time. No need. Welcome to the team." Story number 4. My father is a pastor in a small town. One of those forgotten towns is nestled a few yards off the major highway by redwoods. Being the pastor's daughter, my mother and I had to be as holy as him. My father will always say my first words were, "Amen," which made sense since the first school I went to was Sunday school, and the first book I read was Bible, Stories for God's Children. This did not make me a good child. I proselytized all of my classmates away due to their sinful 10-year-old ways. The only time people talked to me outside of church was when I was called upon for morning prayers. I ended up alone for most of my grade school years. High school was worse. Adults always said that I was a pretty young woman, but I could always tell that they were lying. While being socially isolated was bad, it was torture seeing all the other girls getting boyfriends, hickeys, and large friend groups. I didn't try hard to be liked. I didn't even try hard in any Bible activities. I was always just the pastor's daughter, quietly in the corner while with her frumpy church dress, smiling with her thin lips, with her blue Bible in hand. I went to community college right after I graduated high school. I moved to a more urbanized town, double the size of my hometown, with double the junkies, and ended up in a pretty dingy studio apartment. I did subpar in college, and I dropped out. I would like to say I tried, but in reality, I put in the same effort I did in high school, which is not a lot. I never told them I dropped out. I used the money my parents sent me to pay rent, and I made do working in a bar as a waitress. I tried to rationalize it in my mind. Jesus drank wine with prostitutes, so it's kind of the same. But I don't think Jesus vomited on your shoes and cried on your breasts, so I hated my life. I had a year left before my parents expected a degree, and all that I've done was work for minimum wage. It was either live a life of dingy deceit, or go back home a deceitful liar who wasted her parents' money. I had nowhere to go, and then a man walked through the door. He was sharper than any of the regulars of the bar. He had nice wavy hair, a great jawline, and was dressed in a casual suit with his shirt buttoned down to show his smooth chest. I know that this is a dunk on all the men I've ever seen, but he was the first man in all of my life to make my heart flutter. He sat down in a booth and asked for a light beer. I served him, and we just stared into each other's eyes. I had never seen eyes so black yet so alluring. He asked me to sit across from him, and I did. Other men had asked me to sit next to them or on their lap, but he was the first one to ask me to sit across. I felt respected. We introduced ourselves, or more accurately, I introduced myself. I told him everything about me and answered every question. While I was so flustered, I forgot to ask him anything. He finished his beer, just one beer, and then he left. It was true love. I was completely entrapped. He continued to come back regularly, every night. Just a single light beer. We talked endlessly, we laughed, and shared our sorrows. He said he was also a pastor's kid, and that he actually finished seminary, but never got to be part of or start a church. He was also lonely. He also felt ugly. It was as if he were an exact copy of me. We became close. It came to the point where my boss got angry that I was spending too much of my work hours on one customer. so we decided to go to another bar after my shift. At one point, I shared his beer. I was nervous, since I had never drunk before, even when I was 22 at this point, but his presence and the cold liquid helped me swallow my nerves. One beer became two became five. Next thing I knew, I had to be driven home by him. The thing was, he never pushed boundaries. We only kissed 6 months into our relationship. It was perfect. It was nice. By the time my parents called, we were a year into our relationship. They started asking if I had finished my degree yet. I told them the truth, and they berated me. When my parents' money stopped coming in, my boyfriend proposed. He said he will protect me, and that he will support me forever. I said yes, and we moved to Los Angeles. When I first asked him what his job was, he said he was in communications for a large company. I never questioned how he could afford a nice house, or why random people came in at night, or why he hid drugs in the wine cellar. Clients give me stuff, he said, a simple bullshit explanation to everything, and I believed him. He shared them with me. Alcohol, drugs, jewelry, clubs, restaurants. I accepted it all. He always said he would protect me and make sure I wouldn't take too much. And then I started blacking out. The night before would always be blurry. I would be partying. He would drive me home. I would be lying down in a dingy room, the desert, sometimes even a mansion. My bones and flesh would burn, and something deep inside me would contort and grow cold like a muscle contusion, and I would wake up somewhere else with him next to me. I would wake up with a throbbing headache, my entire body sore in random places. The first time was in the living room of our house, my head on his lap, his hand combing my hair. Next was a hotel room, then an alleyway, a Waffle House in the middle of the woods, and even an entirely different state. But he was always there, with a calming smile on his face, telling me that I had a bad night and that everything was okay, that he is here. This would happen once every 2 weeks. Then it became 4 times a month, once a week, twice a week. Then it almost felt like every day. Almost. The time between high and hungover became longer. From a full night, it became a few days, it became a week, it became a month. And then he would bring me to a friend's party, a business trip, or an anniversary, and I would black out again. My whole life became a daze of constant drugs and booze and fun. I never knew where I was, when I was, what was in my mouth, in my glass. I sometimes forget my husband's name, my name, when I worried about the scars, the open wounds, the bruises, the carvings. He would say that I fell, and I believed him. I woke up in a hotel room, in a hungover state. I wandered down the halls. At some point, I went on a bus, and then I was lost. I sobered a little. The last thing I faintly remembered was that I was in a New York penthouse, celebrating the new year 2000. I stood in fear of the Christmas decorations at the mall I stumbled upon, a banner saying, Christmas of 2001. I wandered around frantically. I didn't know where I was going. I was only stopped forcefully by a sudden stabbing pain. A stab thoroughly through my entire body. I curled over in hot, boiling pain. My nerves were screaming. My flesh was burning. No deep frying with the blood flowing through them. I was screaming in response. A loud, guttural scream. My teeth vibrating with the sound of my scream. I fell to the ground, my head up to the sky. A cross, a bright burning cross haloed by the sun, was burning my eyes. Not burning, they were melting, boiling. I heard a person to my right asking something, but I couldn't understand. I rolled with my eyes closed, my hands hitting my head. The pavement, a public meltdown to ask for someone to make the pain stop. A sharp pain entered my abdomen, causing my body to shake uncontrollably, and I passed out. The rest was a burning haze. I was in a jail cell, then a dirtier jail cell. A priest was in front of my bars. I was in a car. I was in a room, and they burned me. There was no fire, but I kept getting burned over and over again. They were speaking words while my body was writhing in burning agony. Water burned and seeped into my flesh. The rest of the year was a sequence of waking, piercing burns, blackouts, words, burning and sleeping in a wooden room, to wake up and start again. The pain started to lessen, from burns to contusions, from contusions to sores. At some point, I regained my mental footing, and soon I was praying with the nuns rather than fighting them. There had been demons in me for years. Too many to count. The priest was crying tears of joy when he told me this. "Thank God Almighty," he said. "We were able to save you and save the baby before it was too late." I had a child. I forgot that day on the streets. I was pregnant. I forgot who the father is. There were too many. I forgot so many things. That was the day I first held my child. And that was the first day I cried in grief rather than pain. I'm 40 now. I could never recognize my own face. And I could never remember what I looked like. Just as I could never remember my husband's name. I am now a devout Catholic, and I do everything to keep myself and my son safe from the demons in the world. My son is 10 now, and every day I worry about the day when something will come to get him. But I know that all I could do is teach him well. The devil does not want to hurt you. He wants to control you. He wants to get you to question God and step backwards towards him. He may not appear as a man in a suit with black eyes. I don't know which evil forms are his or our own creations. But be careful. Even if you don't believe me, I pray you will be careful. Story number 5. I know, this sounds impossible. How would I have been killed last night? But I have no other explanation for what happened this morning. I woke up with the worst headache of my life. It was so bad I could hardly open my eyes. I realized it was from the blinding fluorescent lights overhead. I was stiff and cold. That was from the metal slab table I was lying undressed on top of. I woke up with a hangover in a morgue. I was laid out on an autopsy table with a white paper sheet covering me. The pathologist wasn't in the room, but the lights were on. And next to my table was a rolling tray of various metal instruments that were no doubt about to be used to slice into me. I had a yellow toe tag labeled Doe Jane. I wasted no time waiting around to see if someone would come back to the room. In the corner by the door, where I assume the pathologist's coat was hanging, was a plastic bag labeled Westchester Police Department. Evidence with my belongings stuffed inside of it. The clothes I had worn to my date the night before were neatly folded and placed inside, along with one of my checkered Vans, 2 socks, my black Coach crossbody purse, and my cell phone, which had a new crack through the screen. My clothes were absolutely filthy, but I redressed myself anyway. I had worn blue jeans and a black sweater, which now were littered with small tears and rips and chalky dirt. My purse had certainly been rifled through. All that was left was a couple of tampons, my go-to lip gloss, and a business card of some girl I had run into downtown ages ago. My wallet and coin purse were gone. Outside of the autopsy room, the hallway was dark, and from the glass doors at the end of the hall, I could see it was still dark out. At this point, I had no idea how much time had passed. All I knew was that I had to get out of there as quickly as I could. I hurried down the hall, one dirty sneaker in my hands, padding down the linoleum hallway in just my socks. Just past the examination room on the right was a door that was propped open, and warm light was coming from inside. I could hear someone humming softly, and the buzz of a microwave warming something fishy. I peeked around the door to see the pathologist with overhead headphones on, air drumming with his back to the door. I took my opportunity and sprinted down the hall and out the front doors. The night was cold and drizzly, not at all like the night of my date was, not to mention that I went out in Lancaster and woke up with my clothes in a Westchester police evidence bag. To my absolute surprise, my phone still turned on, albeit smashed to bits. After several seconds of the Apple logo staring back at me, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree with missed calls and texts, mostly all from my roommate, Bethany. The missed calls started approximately 22 hours prior, but other than the texts from Bethany and a few "you up?" messages from other dating app failures, there was nothing from the guy I had gone out with the night before. I had given him my number, and I know I sent him a message when I got to the bar to let him know I had arrived, but they were gone. Inside the Tinder app, I couldn't find his profile or our messages anywhere, just a grayed out. This user is no longer available box that I can't open. I recently started dating after ending a 3-year relationship with my ex, Kyle. I hadn't done much dating prior to him and thought I'd try my hand at dating apps. I had the basics: Hinge, Bumble, Tinder. I even tried my hand at Facebook dating. Most were dead ends. Some ended in an awkward hookup at their cramped studio apartments, or sneaking past their roommate's door at 2 a.m. I admittedly mostly used Tinder when I was getting antsy and looking for a short-term connection, I suppose. I couldn't remember much about who I met up with for my date the night before. I vaguely remember a photo on my screen. A white guy with brown hair. Super specific, I know. I don't have any memories of seeing him in person, either. The last of my memories was me taking a seat at the bar, ordering a whiskey sour, and texting the guy I had mated with. Next thing I knew, I was under a cloth on an autopsy table. Now I'm sure you're thinking, just look at the screenshots of his profile that you sent to all of your friends. I didn't take one. In fact, I was avoiding telling anyone I was on the apps or meeting up with strangers. Over the last few months, there have been several girls in Philadelphia who have shown up dead after meeting up with someone from a dating app. But I'm smart. I carry pepper spray and a taser. I can spot a fake profile from a mile away. And honestly, sometimes I just want a stranger to buy me a drink and call me pretty. So I kept my dating app adventures on the DL. And last night was no different. I told Bethany I was meeting up with a friend and slipped out. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't give details. And besides, all those girls were hundreds of miles away. If there were a deranged killer on Tinder, I wouldn't cross paths with him. But now, I'm standing in front of the Westchester Medical Examiner's office with one shoe, and I'm pretty sure I've just risen from the dead. Bethany answered almost immediately and told me I hadn't been home in almost 37 hours, give or take. She chalked it up to me hitting it off with someone at a bar and spending the night. But she was minutes away from filing a report before I called. She was on the way to the station right then. She had already called, and they told her she had to go in person. I made it all the way to the bus station before I even thought to consider what I looked like. My voice was hoarse and dry, but I figure if I've been dead for a day, it probably fit the bill, you know. I opened my camera, and I literally looked like I rolled out of the morgue. My hair was knotted in the back and had sticky mud in it. I had a busted open wound across the bridge of my nose and god-awful bruising around my neck. I was ready to deny this whole deal, honestly. I must have gotten roofied and robbed, and it was some medical examiner's first day on the job. But as I took the bus ride back home, a news alert popped up on my phone. Another young woman was slain after meeting with a dating app suitor Friday night. Who is next? And you guys, I think it was me. Well, it was supposed to be anyway. Story number 6. I was always a pretty shy guy. Probably because of this, I had trouble making any friends. It had been the same throughout my life. College was no exception. During the first semester of college, I talked to some people here and there, but they never really became my friends. Before I knew it, the first semester of my college had ended. When I came back to college after the semester break, it was like I was stepping into a whole new place. Strangely enough, I was put in classes where I only saw a few of my old classmates from the previous semester. All the others were people whom I didn't know before. Most didn't talk to me and seemed to mind their business. But there was this one group that usually sat separated from all the other students in the lecture hall. They usually sat in the corner of the back row. They also didn't talk to me at first. But one day, before the start of the lecture, one of them called me. Probably because I sat pretty close to them, they invited me to come and sit next to them. So I did. I found it strange that they had actually interacted with me, of all people. They didn't interact with anyone else in the class. They were a group of 3. Let's call them Brandon, Michael, and John. John asked me a few personal questions, and I answered them. Of course, being the loner I was, I welcomed his questions. Ever since that day, I would always sit next to them and chat with them. They would ask me to show them my notebook, which I always bring to college to write important points from the lectures. I did notice that they never really brought anything when they came to college. Not even a notebook to take notes. I found it a bit strange, since everyone else would bring those things with them when they attended the lecture classes. When I asked them one day, they told me that they don't need notebooks because the lectures were easy to understand for them. I didn't really bother with what my other classmates thought of me. Looking back now, they obviously thought I was crazy or something, because I did notice them giving me weird stares whenever I talked to Brandon, Michael, or John. It made me really uncomfortable. I opened up about it to Brandon one day, and he told me not to mind it. So I carried on as I usually did, not minding the stares I got from my other classmates. And then started the nightmares. I kept having the same nightmare over and over again. In the nightmare, I'd stay pretty far away from Brandon, Michael, and John in the lecture hall. I would eventually look back and see them with unnaturally wide grins that went ear to ear, with empty eye sockets. The minute I see them, I would wake up from the nightmare. This was probably when I started to notice strange things about the 3 of them. Whenever they laughed, it almost seemed like they were forcing themselves to laugh. I don't know how to explain it, really. Their laughs were not natural, at least to me. And on top of that, they always refused to let me have their numbers. And I have never seen them with phones or anything of that sort. It was nearing the end of the semester. I was sitting next to Brandon, Michael, and John, as usual. The lecture class was about to start, and the professor hadn't arrived yet. I took my phone out of my pocket to check the class schedule for the day. I unlocked my phone and tried to access the gallery, where I had the schedule saved. But for whatever reason, it wouldn't respond to my touch. I tapped over 10 times, and it didn't work. I started tapping everywhere on the screen and accidentally opened the camera app. The default camera was set to the selfie camera, which showed me. But even though Brandon, Michael, and John were sitting right next to me, it didn't show them at all. Just all empty seats. My blood ran cold. They seemed to notice my fear and grinned at me with the same creepy grin they had in my nightmares. I bolted out of the lecture hall and went outside of college. When I glanced back at the college, they were there at the gate with their unusually wide grins. I ran as fast I could, as far as my legs would carry me. This was when everything started making sense to me. The stares from my classmates finally made sense to me. I wondered why no one had intervened at all, because to them, I was like some crazy guy talking to himself and laughing by himself. I stopped going to that college after that. I just couldn't go to that creepy place again. As soon as I stopped going to college, the nightmares stopped completely. Things went back to normal, and I completed my degree at another college. I always wonder what would have happened to me if I had kept attending that college. Story number 7. My wife, Emily, had severe bleeding after the delivery of our first baby, and she was dead for 3 minutes. I thank my lucky stars that the doctors could revive her. They had to put 4 pints of blood in her. She was in a coma for 2 weeks. Her body was healing itself, said the doctors. I can still feel the fear I felt, not knowing if I was going to lose the love of my life. Having a newborn child, along with this, wore me down so much that I wished we had never had our daughter. Emily woke up on the 16th day. I cried like a baby then, and within a month, we were back home. Life was good for a while. I had my wife and our little bundle of a miracle, whom we named Lily. The changes began slowly. It was her eyes that I noticed first. Emily had such warm brown eyes that they could put hot chocolate to shame. She had really expressive eyes that were always full of joy. But one day, it was as if her eyes lost all emotion. I was entering the kitchen to make some formula to feed the baby when I noticed Em staring at me, or more like through me. Her eyes were empty. I asked if she was okay, to which she said she was more than okay. I suspected maybe she had postpartum depression because, truth be told, the delivery was more than traumatic. I decided to observe her closer. Then I noticed the staring. She'd be rocking our baby girl in the nursery one moment, and then staring off into the distance the next. It would have been somewhat normal if it weren't for the twitching. Her head would often twitch to the sides, as if hearing something or someone. It was one of these twitching episodes that had me believe it wasn't my wife anymore. I had a get-together with my colleagues one night, after which I returned home at around 1 a.m. I was trying to be extra silent so as not to wake Lily and Em. I noticed that the light was on in the nursery. Maybe a late-night feeding, I thought. The door to the nursery was slightly ajar, and I peeked in to get a glimpse. What I saw shook me to my core. Em was standing at the head end of the crib. Her face was, how should I say it, glitching. It was like another person was trapped in her body and was trying to get out. And that face, it was not human. I could feel my heart beating in my ears. I couldn't breathe. I slowly inched back, but then I remembered about Lily. That thing was with my baby. I pushed open the door, ready to what? Hit my wife? I honestly didn't know what to do. That thing turned towards me, and we locked eyes. The next day, I woke up in my bed in the same clothes. Emily wasn't in the room. I couldn't remember what happened last night. My baby. I had to get to my baby. I rushed out of the bedroom into the nursery. Lily wasn't there. No, this couldn't be happening. Then I heard the giggles coming from downstairs. I flew down the stairs. Emily was in the kitchen, bouncing Lily in her arms. You were so drunk last night that you crashed out as soon as you got in, she says, laughing. She looked normal, no glitching face, no empty eyes. She looked like my Emily. She felt like my Em. The days passed, and Emily was back to normal. Maybe the fear and stress had gotten into me. Maybe I imagined all this. A psychotic break, I guess. All was well in our lives. Then came our anniversary. Lily was to stay with my parents for the day. Em cooked my favorite dinner, dressed in a red halter dress that had me more than a little excited. Things got heated, and we made love that night. It was the first time we were intimate after her delivery. I woke up alone. The water was running in the bathroom. I slowly got up from the bed with the decision to surprise Em with a massage in the bath. She might have been sore from yesterday. I inched open the door, and what I saw had my heart beating hundreds a minute. Emily was standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, rubbing her belly, her very pregnant belly. The face in the mirror didn't belong to my Em. It was something else. Something evil. I closed the door quietly, got dressed as fast as I could, and was out of the house in minutes. It was like I was on autopilot. What the hell was that? What am I supposed to do now? Call an exorcist? But what about the thing in her belly? Right now, I'm parked in front of my parents' house writing this post. I don't know what to do anymore. I can't lose my Em, not again. So please, any advice you have will be greatly appreciated. Story number 8. Every morning at 3:33 a.m., they gather in my basement. I've been living in my grandmother's house for 6 months now, ever since the funeral. Ever since the lawyers handed me keys to a place I'd visited maybe 3 times as a kid. Ever since I lost my job, my apartment, and what little family I had left, to a year that seemed determined to strip everything away. The house sits on Maple Street in one of those neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone, where casseroles appear on doorsteps when someone dies, where people still leave their doors unlocked. At least that's what I thought. Step, step, step. The sound of feet on my basement stairs. It started the first week. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I'd hear the unmistakable creak of the basement door opening. Then footsteps, careful, deliberate, multiple sets, descending into the space below. At first, I convinced myself it was settling. Old houses make noise, especially in winter. The heating system groans, the wood contracts, pipes tick their metallic lullabies, but houses don't whisper. Come now, come now, come. I'd grab the baseball bat grandmother kept beside her bed and creep down the hallway, heart hammering against my ribs. But every time I checked, the basement door was locked. The deadbolt I'd installed myself was turned tight. The stairs beyond lay empty in the moonlight, filtering through the high windows. Still, the whispers continued, muffled voices rising through the floorboards like steam from some underground prayer meeting. I'd press my ear to the hardwood and catch fragments, words that sounded like confessions, like testimonies, like the kind of sharing that happens in church basements and community centers when people gather to heal. We are here. We are here. We are. The neighbors were strange about it when I asked. Mrs. Patterson next door would get this look when I mentioned the sounds. Not confusion, but something else. Something careful. Your grandmother? She'd say. She helped a lot of people. Had a gift for it. Made space for folks who needed support. What kind of support? The kind you can't get during regular hours. Mr. Hendricks from across the street was more direct. Some things don't stop just because the sun comes up, son. Pain doesn't punch a time clock. Grief doesn't respect visiting hours. He'd glanced at my grandmother's house with something that looked almost like reverence. She understood that. Step, step, step. Always the same rhythm. I started staying awake, waiting. 3 weeks in, I finally worked up the courage to hide in the closet under the stairs at 3:30 a.m., where I could see the basement door through the slats. At 3:33 exactly, the deadbolt turned by itself. The door swung open on hinges that never made a sound when I used them, but whispered like wind through leaves when they opened. They came through my kitchen door first. I heard the soft snick of the lock turning, saw flashlight beams dance across the walls, but it wasn't the hard white light of intruders. It was warm, golden, the kind that doesn't hurt tired eyes. 7 people, different ages, different backgrounds, but all carrying something that weighed heavily on their shoulders. A woman in scrubs who moved like she'd worked a double shift. A man with paint-stained fingers and hollow cheeks. A teenager whose backpack looked like it held everything she owned. An elderly gentleman using a walker, each step careful and measured. Ring, ring, ring. The soft chime of something metallic. They descended my basement stairs like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Like this was their space, their sanctuary, their cathedral made of concrete and shadows. I waited until I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore, then crept to the basement door. The stairs had changed. Not physically. The wood was still scarred where grandmother had dragged her Christmas boxes up and down for decades. The handrail still wobbled at the 3rd step, but something felt different. Warmer, like the space below had been transformed by intention, by ritual, by the simple act of people gathering with purpose. Come now, come now, come. I descended into my own basement and found it full of light. They'd strung small electric candles from the ceiling joists, the kind churches used during evening services. The kind that won't burn down a building, but still cast everything in gold. Folding chairs arranged in a circle. A coffee pot plugged into the outlet by the water heater. The smell of fresh brew mixing with the scent of vanilla and lavender from candles placed on upturned crates. The walls were covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. Polaroids and phone prints and formal portraits, all showing faces at different stages of something. Grief, recovery, transformation. Some were before and after shots. Others captured moments of breakthrough, of connection, of healing, caught in the act. In the center of the largest wall, a photo of my grandmother surrounded by dozens of people, all of them holding small silver bells. We are here. We are here. We are. She saved my life, said a voice behind me. I spun around to find the woman in scrubs, her face kind but tired, in a way that spoke of years spent caring for others. 3 years ago, I was working ICU during the worst of the pandemic. Lost more patients in 6 months than I had in the previous 10 years combined. Started drinking to sleep, then drinking to wake up, then drinking to exist. She gestured to the photos on the wall. Found out about the meetings through my neighbor. Thought it was some kind of cult at first. who meets at 3:33 a.m., but Margaret explained it was the only time that worked for everyone. Night shift workers, insomniacs, people whose pain doesn't respect business hours, people who needed a place to gather when the rest of the world was asleep. Step, step, step. More feet on the stairs. The others joined us. The painter with his hollow cheeks, the teenager with her overstuffed backpack, the elderly man with his walker. Each took their place in the circle of chairs like they were returning home after a long journey. "I lost my son," said the painter, his voice steady but soft. "Car accident. Couldn't paint for 2 years. Couldn't see color anymore. Couldn't see the point. Margaret found me on the bridge at 3 a.m. one night. Not quite ready to jump, but not quite ready to climb down either." The teenager spoke next. "My parents kicked me out when I came out. Been living in shelters and friends' couches for 8 months. Someone at the youth center told me about the meetings. Said there were people here who understood what it meant to lose family." The elderly man adjusted his walker and smiled. "Lost my wife of 57 years last spring. Haven't slept through the night since. The doctor wants to give me pills, but pills don't cure loneliness. These folks do, by ring, ring, ring." The soft chime again. Each person held a small silver bell, the kind used in meditation, in prayer, in moments of remembering. "We ring them for the people we've lost," the nurse explained. "For the parts of ourselves we've had to let go. For the hope we're trying to find again." "But why here?" I asked. "Why my grandmother's basement?" "Because she understood," said a new voice. I turned to see a woman about my mother's age descending the stairs, carrying a thermos and a bag of what smelled like homemade cookies. "Margaret lost her husband when your mom was just 10, raised her alone while working 2 jobs and fighting her own battles with depression. She knew what it meant to feel invisible, to struggle when everyone else was asleep. She began setting up supplies, tissues, notebooks, more of those small electric candles. She started the meetings 20 years ago. Just her and Mrs. Patterson, talking through their grief over coffee at her kitchen table. Word spread quietly, the way these things do. People who needed help, finding people who could give it. Come now, come now, come." The time is specific. The painter continued. 3:33 a.m. Sacred numbers in some traditions. But for us, it just meant the deep night, when defenses are down and truth comes easier. When the world is quiet enough to hear each other, really hear. They began to sit, and something in their posture invited me to join them. I took a chair between the nurse and the teenager, my hands shaking slightly as I accepted the small silver bell someone pressed into my palm. "We start with the bells," the elderly man explained. 3 rings for what we've lost. Then we share whatever needs sharing. No judgment, no advice unless it's asked for. No rushing toward solutions. Just witness. Ring, ring, ring. The sound filled the basement, each bell adding its voice to a chorus that seemed to transform the concrete walls into something sacred. I thought of my grandmother, of the job I'd lost, of sitting alone in this house for months, feeling like I was disappearing. "I inherited this house," I heard myself saying, "but I don't know how to live in it. Don't know how to live anywhere, really. Everything fell apart this year, and I can't figure out how to put it back together." Nods around the circle. No one tried to fix me or offer platitudes. They just listened as I talked about loneliness, about feeling like I was failing at being human, about lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering if anyone would notice if I just stopped trying. The insomnia's the worst part, I said. It's like the darkness amplifies everything wrong. That's why we meet in it, said the woman with the cookies. To prove the darkness isn't empty. To show it can hold communities just as easily as despair. We are here. We are here. We are. One by one, they shared their stories. The nurse talked about learning to see death as a transition rather than a failure. The painter described the first time he'd been able to see color again. How it happened gradually, like dawn breaking, and how the meetings had been his lighthouse through the dark hours. The teenager spoke about chosen family, about how the meetings had taught her that love doesn't always come from the people who share your DNA. The elderly man talked about his wife, but also about discovering that grief and gratitude could coexist, that missing someone could become a form of loving them. Step, 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 the rhythm of healing. Your grandmother, said the woman with the cookies. She had a theory about 3:33 a.m., said it was the hour when the veil between struggling and healing was thinnest, when people were most ready to be honest about what they needed. She pulled out a photo. Grandmother surrounded by what must have been 50 people, all holding their bells, all with expressions of peace I'd never seen in daylight gatherings. She called it the hour of sacred insomnia, time set aside for people whose healing couldn't wait for business hours. The meetings, I learned, had been happening in this basement for 2 decades, rotating leadership, evolving membership, but always the same purpose, creating space for people to not be okay in the company of others who understood. Ring, 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 for what we've lost, but also, said the nurse, raising her bell again, for what we've found. Ring, 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 for what we've gained. The painter joined in, for the strength we discovered we had. Ring, 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 for unexpected resilience. The teenager, for chosen family. Ring, 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 for love that appears in darkness. The elderly man, for the privilege of having had something worth grieving. Ring, 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 for depth of connection. For this basement, I said, surprising myself, and for inheriting more than I knew. Ring, 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 for sacred inheritance. They stayed until nearly dawn, these night shift healers, these sacred insomniacs. As they prepared to leave, each person hugged me. Not the perfunctory embraces of social obligation, but the full-body connections of people who'd shared truth in the dark. Next week? Asked the nurse. I'll put on the coffee, I said. Come now, come now, come. That was 6 months ago. The meetings continue every morning at 3:33 a.m. The membership changes. People heal and graduate. New people find us through whispered recommendations, through the quiet network of night shift workers and fellow insomniacs who understand that some churches meet in basements and some prayers happen after midnight. I've learned to sleep again, mostly, but I still wake at 3:30, still make coffee, still light the electric candles my grandmother left carefully stored in boxes marked for the meetings. I've added my own photos to the walls, snapshots of breakthrough moments, of laughter shared in a basement at 4 a.m., of people learning to carry their grief without being crushed by it. The neighbors still nod knowingly when delivery trucks ask about the coffee deliveries, the steady stream of quiet visitors, the warm golden light visible through the basement, windows in the deepest part of the night. Mrs. Patterson brings homemade cookies every few weeks. Mr. Hendricks stops by to check that our space heater is working properly, that we have enough supplies. Your grandmother would be proud, he told me last week. She knew the meetings would continue, knew someone would step up to keep the space sacred. We are here. We are here. We are. I understand now what grandmother left me. Not just a house, but a purpose. Not just inherited grief, but inherited healing. Not just isolation, but a template for creating community in the spaces where community is needed most. Every morning at 3:33 a.m., they gather in my basement. People who've learned that darkness can hold light, that night shift healing is healing nonetheless, that the hour when most people sleep can be the hour when others learn to live again. Step, 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 the sound of people coming home. And I make the coffee, light the candles, and ring my bell 3 times for what I lost, for what I found, and for the sacred inheritance of understanding that healing, like grief, doesn't punch a time clock. The meetings will continue in this basement, in these dark hours, in the company of people brave enough to gather when the rest of the world sleeps. Because someone needs to tend the lighthouse. Someone needs to prove that 3:33 a.m. can be an hour of hope instead of despair. Ring, ring, ring. We are here. We are here. We are. You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.